Hey gang, welcome back to Joe Daddy's Garage. Today's video is part 15 in the 68 Mustang fastback conversion build that I've been doing. Now I will say I made it back from SEMA. I was there last week, did some video stuff, got to see some cool things, and I will be posting a video about that later on, so stay tuned for that. Now, in the last video I left off with the work that I was doing on this. I had finished installing the roll bar in the back of the car, and I also finished installing the roof, attaching it to the window opening in the back and also the rain gutters drip rails on the side. So all of that is fully welded, and I'm very happy with how it looks, and I'm going to move on. Now, I had mentioned in the previous video that I was debating on what I wanted to do, because one of the ideas was to start working on the front suspension for the car. But I decided I don't want to do that just yet because it makes more sense to finish up the back of the car. And so right now I have pieces and parts laid out in the back area of the car, and I'm going to show you some of those and what the plans are moving forward with this. Now, these pieces are primarily dynacorn. As you know, everything that's silver has a weld-through primer is dynacorn. The tail panel, it says dynacorn, or it said dynacorn on the packaging. I don't know if it's actually dynacorn or not. Not that it really matters much, but I just want to let you know that ahead of time. Also, I have extensions that are from dynacorn, and those are black. And I have these filler pieces sitting up on top here. Those go in the corners where the tail panel meets the quarter panel. So there's going to be some fine tuning that needs to happen with this, and let me show you what I'm working on. So the pieces that I have here, these are the quarter extensions. And these came in this box right here. It says dynacorn on the box. Now, is it theirs? I don't know. But these fit very well. I can demonstrate that right here. I do have one of the studs in. And if I put it up against the quarter panel, it lines up very nicely. I mean, really nice. I'm very happy with that. There's probably going to be a little bit of filler work that needs to take place here on the top, but I'll deal with that later on. I may be able to do some other modifications. In the past, what I've done, if I'm trying to reshape something, I've taken spot welds loose and reshaped it and then welded it back in. And I may be doing some of that because this has a nice curve here, and this kind of flattens out here in this midsection. So we're going to deal with that later on. Also, I have a set of hinges. Now again, these came from dynacorn, and these will bolt to the original style mount locations that I installed with the rear seat panel. So I will be making a test fit of the deck lid using these. And these are the corner pieces. Now, there's something specific here I want to show you with this, and I'll give you more details as I move forward. This piece comes in from underneath the quarter panel, and it's supposed to interact with the inner drip rail area or the trunk opening. And you can see it has this channel here, right? So the intent is that this slides up underneath this and that everything lines up perfectly, right? Not so the case. You'll find that this shape right here isn't exactly the same as this shape right here. And what I ended up doing was I was having a little trouble. I was test fitting these pieces, and as I always say, test fit, right? And what I'm going to show you is a comparison between these two. So putting these exactly up against each other, I'm not cheating in any direction at all. If I turn this sideways, see that shape difference? This one has a more pronounced hump in the middle or corner area. And that comes into play because when this interacts, pieces fight each other because they don't fit well together. So when I come back this way and I'm lining them up exactly the same with the curve, this one sits lower than this one. I also like to make templates. So this right here, this cardboard template, matches this shape of this piece on the quarter panel. So what I actually did is I put it up against that. I took a hammer and I tapped onto it to get the exact shape, and then I finished cutting it out. So this fits perfectly on this. And I'll point out, it also fits perfectly on the opposite side. So those pieces have the same shape. And then whenever you start looking at these, and let's see if I can do a comparative angle here. So if I put this up here, right, and this piece matches this shape, and you come back in here, and this one's not bad. It's actually kind of close to what kind of shape you want. Still a little bit off, like this may need some bending to make it work better, and it may take some trimming overall just to make these pieces interact. You know, they cut this maybe a little bit long here where it overlaps the top of the tail panel. Now, this piece for the opposite side is not the same. It is not the same. And I don't, you know, again, they just stamp these things out. They probably don't pay much attention to them. But this one fits nice, seems to fit nice. And then this one, while it does, you're not going to change that. It's a flat spot, but it doesn't match the rest of this. So this actually needs to go up and have some massage work done to it. This is the other quarter extension. Fits very nice. I like it. This part of the panel right here, this piece, this inner piece, is not fully welded on this corner, and it's not welded at the bottom. Same way on the other side. So this piece can actually move, right? And you may end up having to manipulate it into position. The tail panel is supposed to drop in behind this flange right here. So we have that on both sides, and essentially you bring it up like this. Drop it in behind that, and it's supposed to fit like a glove, right? Well, what I'm already seeing, this corner right here, see if I can swing this around a little more. This section kind of fights with the rest of this, meaning there's a recess here on the inside of this tail panel, or on the end of the tail panel, and when you bring this up, it's hitting here in this corner, it's hitting up here in this corner, and this is with the tail panel in pretty much the exact location it's supposed to be based on stuff like these notches right here. So these are on all of these panels, and they're meant to line up, and you can see I have them lined up. They're dead on those areas, but I may have to trim this panel back to help the tail panel come out, because right now it's not meeting this upper section right here. So you have to look at how these things interact and what you need to do to manipulate them into position. So let's look at the other side as well. So it's a similar situation on this side. While this does fit a little better here, it's hitting up here in this corner, it's hitting a little bit here, and this piece is more vertical, and this section is leaned back just slightly. So some manipulation will have to happen, and as I talked about with this piece, let me change the angle so you can see it better from sort of a side view. So when this comes up, this piece is intended to come underneath and fit like this. Now this little flange right here, this overlap, this will have to be opened up, and then this section will have to be compressed so that it will fit underneath that. It's supposed to be pinched over top. So if I put that back in there, pull this back, now you can see this does not line up at all. There's a gap here, and it's fighting it in multiple ways, like it's hitting right here in this corner, and that's gonna that affects how it moves, or where it can sit. You get this upper section here lined up, and it really has to twist. It needs to go a little bit like that, because when you look at the line going across, if I have it like make it kind of fit comfortably, this thing is at an angle and it's off. So when you bring it back in, you can see I'm fighting with it. It just doesn't go together like magic. So these are some of the things that I'm going to have to manipulate. Also, if I remember correctly, I'll have to verify this. I think there's a measurement from this forward flange up here to the flange on the tail panel, and I think that's supposed to be I want to say 15 inches, but I'll verify that to make sure. So when you're doing this, like that right there, it says about 14 and a half, and it's because I can't get it to come back any further. So, you know, things like that, you want to measure and make sure, and part of that will come into play whenever I set the deck lid on and verify the interaction with the tail panel. So don't get ahead of yourselves and just think, I'll just put this in place and screw it down and, you know, weld it, whatever. There's lots of things you have to make interact together to make it work. So I will show you all that as I move forward, but we're gonna have to get started. So these hinges, brand new out of the box, I had never had them on the car. I never even test fitted them to the brackets until right now. And when I first went to put them in, the rearmost bolt didn't feel quite right. So I had to take it apart and just kind of run the bolt through a couple times to make sure the threads were okay. But once I did that, they bolted up just fine. And I do like these springs better than the springs on the earlier cars because they have the coil clock spring type of thing, and it just makes it so much more convenient to use. So I took the tail panel out of the way, and as I normally do when I'm doing stuff by myself, I try to find ways to protect the panels. And not that it's that big a deal right now because there's no paint, but by setting these blankets up there, I can set the deck lid on top of that and just let it rest on the deck filler panel until I get the bolts in place. Now this took a little bit of time. You know, obviously I've not even had this on before. I just had the deck lid setting in the opening previously. So I started to do some adjusting. I take the blankets out of the way because they don't need them anymore, and then I start closing the deck lid to see where the alignment is. And I always take my time with this. It's easy to get in a hurry, and you may end up tweaking something or getting it out of place. And you have to consider what happens with these movements. So that hinge, not only does it move up and down, but when you rotate it, it actually indexes slightly fore and aft. You also have fore and aft on the deck lid itself, and you can pivot on the bolts, meaning you can take the two bolts loose on one side and push it forward, and it'll affect the gap on the other side. So take your time when you're playing with these type of panels and just look at every possible scenario that you have available to you. So I continued to adjust this and tried to get it as close as I could to what I felt like was the right position. And even now there's probably still some adjustments that I can do, but it just takes time to make these adjustments. And I do frequently use a little DeWalt, power tool here. It just makes it easier whenever you're running these bolts back and forth to make these adjustments, but you can make the same adjustments with a ratchet. Just, again, take your time and don't get in a hurry. So, as you saw, I fit the deck lid on, I put the hinges on, and I'm going to show you some of the details that go with that. So currently, this is really close to this edge. And you'll notice, maybe you'll see it in the video, this corner of the deck lid is low. Now, these deck lids, when they're made, it's just an inner structure, and then the outer piece is wrapped around it. And basically, these things can be manipulated. So if I pan the camera up here, this thing, you could actually twist it a little bit to change the shape. Okay, and this corner, I may have to just kind of massage it up. So if I close this down, and this corner is sitting low, I have to do something to get that up. And it may be that I just kind of force it up by hand and get it to even that little bit right there, moved it up a little higher. So Shouldn't take much to manipulate this. And what I tell people is when you do these type of things, once you get it where you like it, tack weld it. Make sure it stays in that location. Now the reason I'm doing all of this right now is I wanted to verify something. As I was showing you earlier with the tail panel and the other pieces, and there's interaction with this edge over here, how the tail panel rubs up against it. I was thinking about it a little bit because I know that some people have had problems with these being pushed in or pulled out, you know, not fitting right. So by doing this, I can verify right now, this is kind of close to the deck lid. So what will end up happening, I'll probably try to push this out slightly whenever I put the tail panel in to help compensate for this gap and also maybe some of this. Also, I want to show you this. This is another slight concern. When you put the extension in, and I'm only using one bolt, but it's lined up good on the side and the side here. Right now, the deck lid is sitting back behind this. The fix may end up being, I can take this extension and rotate it out a little bit and correct this at the edge, and now I have a gap up here. So normally when I do stuff like this, I can cut this, push this corner. Let me just move this out of the way. I can cut this up on top here, push this back and weld in a filler. That's what I recommend. Some people may try to add something to this edge. You could do that as well. But I'm right now, that's kind of what I'm looking at doing, is reshaping the quarter so that the deck lid and the extension line up. Now there's still more to do. I'm just kind of playing with it to see what happens. If I bring that deck lid up and I flush it pretty close here, it actually lines up nice here, but again, there's a gap here on the inside. So let's go to the other side and talk about that. So this side, I bring it down. Right now, this is pretty snug. I mean, there's really no room there, and we need to have a gap on this side. So this also lends to the idea of pushing this out slightly to make room whenever I put in the tail panel. Bring this extension up, set it in place, and it's actually making, it's good here, it's on flush on the end, pretty close, but it is also making contact with the deck lid. So, and this, again, this is why I tell you to test fit all this stuff. What I'll end up doing, more than likely, is pushing this out when it comes time to put the tail panel in place, and trying to spread this open a little to create a gap on the edges of the deck lid. So don't ever consider just doing this, like putting in the tail panel and then test fitting the deck lid, because that'll come back to haunt you. You'll end up having to modify the ends of the deck lid to make it fit. So right now, I'm going to figure out how I can do this. I know I've seen other people take like a porta power and push these out, and I don't know that I need to do that much. But if I can just pull on this, it actually changes this shape up here slightly as well. So I don't know if you can see, it's hard to show you with my hands in the way, but you can see it just barely changes that shape. But it is something that needs to be taken care of. Now the other thing I noticed, pretty trivial, like there's lines here on the deck lid, and these should correspond with the lines on the quarter panels, and this one's pretty close. That one is okay as well, but just little detail stuff. It may take some effort to improve these. Now what I mean by that is you can't change like the shape, and sometimes you may end up taking body filler to make those things transition. It's up to you on that. I don't know that it's that critical. Once it's got paint on it, it's gonna be hard to see those anyway, but just some little detail stuff that may come into play later. Also, one more thing that I may have to address in some way is this hump on the center of the deck lid. So this really needs to go down a little bit, and believe it or not, a lot of times what I've done is taken like a block of wood and put here, and then hit it with a mallet and let it bounce into it and kind of reshape this. So I'm going to look into that a little more. I don't know if I want to do that just yet. It's close, but it needs to be addressed in one way or another. So keep that in mind when you're working on these. I want to emphasize how much movement I have. If you remember, when I was welding this together, I chose not to weld in this overlap of the deck filler panel into the quarter area. And all I'm doing here, I have a simple like dowel rod, long, broom handle looking thing. I'm going to put it against the inside of the roll bar that I welded in, and I'm just going to use this little block of wood. Now, one of the ideas I had was to come inside of the quarter panel up here, basically put this on the inside and push out with a block of wood just to give it a little change in shape. Let me just show you how much you can move this. Now I'm not putting a lot of force on this. Basically you can see I have a very short leverage arm, and if I just push like that, look how much that moves. And it's moving up here where I did not weld this yet. And it's also moving the hinge ever so slightly. So that just shows you how much you can flex this metal to make it work. So I'm going to just kind of massage that a little. Haven't done anything else. Let's see what happens. That actually, it moved it just a tiny bit. However, we need it to stay out that way. So I might play with this a little. Just trying to make it simple. Like I could, in effect, break loose these spot welds and push that out and re-weld those. That's an idea. I could set the tail panel in here, push that out, run a couple screws in, force it to stay in place. So I'm going to have to experiment a little bit and see exactly what I want to do. So this may be a little shocking to some people when you see me taking a wood block and a mallet and hitting a panel. This is something I learned to do from an old body man. We used to do this kind of thing at the body shop. If you needed to make a panel change shape, you can use the block of wood and not hit directly on the panel itself because you'll create a dent, but you can use that block of wood to spread the load across. And you may be able to see it slightly as I go through this process. The deck lid does change shape, and you also notice that there's a peak in the middle of the deck lid. So I'm not going in the center, I'm going on either side of that peak to help it compress down. This is a common technique. A lot of people do this. I don't think many people actually demonstrate it though. They're maybe don't want people to think that they're doing something out of the ordinary, but it's a common thing that many body guys do. Now I also, as I make these adjustments and I'm eyeballing it back and forth, I'm taking my time, and I'm not like wailing away on this thing. I'm just hitting it enough to make it move. I also looked at these corners on the side here, and just another idea, take that block of wood and put it underneath that corner and flex down, and it'll actually rotate that corner back up. So use the leverage of the panel. You have the hinges, you have the panel itself, and you can make these things change direction. Here, all I'm doing is knocking off some of that edge. I realized it was maybe a little wider than it needed to be. And for this panel to come back, there's only so many things you can do. I've seen other people trim off the tail panel, but I want to keep that piece of the tail panel as much as I can because I need something to weld to. So if you start trimming stuff off that you're going to have to address that at some point later on. So I do the same thing on the driver's side, and I'm not taking off a lot of material. I'm just trying to get just a little more room for that tail panel to have some clearance. Now, at this point, I'm using this block of wood, as I had mentioned, and I'm pressing the quarter panel over, and it's really not taking much force. I mean, I'm using a very short block, and that leverage is pretty small when you think about it. I'm marking where I want to put the plug welds, and down in the bottom there, I end up not using plug welds so much in that corner as I do kind of just a weld that flange together, because a plug weld really wouldn't make much difference, and this is all covered up anyway by the extension. So using a hammer and dolly to shape that and flatten everything out so it's ready to go. So as I'm making these adjustments, and of course I posted some pictures on like Facebook and stuff, one of the comments that I saw was talking about the way this deck lid interacts with the deck filler panel. And what they had suggested was actually cutting a line right there on the edge, or just below the edge, and letting this panel come up. They're implying that the panel may not be shaped correctly, and that might be a fix. I may look at that later, but at this point I'm pretty happy with how this is interacting. Now, as I'm going through the steps here, I have identified where I would likely put some spot welds, or plug welds, so I'll punch holes in that area later. Those are all marked with a little black dot. And then I was fitting in this corner piece, and what you'll notice is I have a line drawn right here. Well, with this clamped basically in place with the tail panel, and also where I had opened this up, made this nice and tight, now this overhangs. And I don't know if they just intended for that to be that way, but I don't believe it's supposed to be, obviously. And it should not be just kind of randomly shaped. I think it should be square to the tail panel. So I'm going to have to trim that down. Also, I'm not real sure yet what I'm going to do with this. I had considered cutting this piece and reshaping it, but I don't know that I want to or need to. One idea I had was to reshape this upper section, but I had set the extension on and it actually flows really nice. Probably the easiest fix, because I don't know exactly what this is intended to look like. I don't have an original one to compare to, but I could easily create a filler piece and weld that in and make this all smooth, and it would look really nice. So I may end up doing something along those lines. I could also just seam seal that, fill that up with seam sealer, but I don't like to do that. It's a little too high. The other thing I wanted to point out was I have this piece as well. This is the support for the trunk lock and the latch mechanism, and this is different from a standard, or let's just say it's different from ones that I've done before. So on the earlier cars, this thing was very uniform shape, and this one is not. So if I pull this out, you'll see this has a really weird kind of shape to it, and obviously this centerpiece has to line up with the filler neck, and this lower flange slips into the gap down below. So this has to pocket into that, and then you have to line it up left and right, and have it in the right spot. So what I'm basing it on is right now where these corners up here, where they match the shape up above on the tail panel. So if I push that in, that comes back. Seems to line up pretty nice. The lock, I believe, is going to be offset. I know normally they have these things kind of with a bent rod. I don't think it's going to be that big a deal. But that's where we're at. Now, also, when I push these sides out, it flexed this area right here. I had welded this previously. I had opened it up just a little bit. Now the thing is, I can't change this length. I mean, I could if I wanted to cut that open and move it, but there's nothing to really gain from that. I may end up fine-tuning this just a little more on my own. Like, I could cut a line up on top here and push that flange over, tighten it up, and then tack weld that back together. I don't know that I need to. This seam sealer goes in this gap anyway, and it's not super critical that it be pinch tight, like there's no gap at all. So it's not that big a concern. So what I want to do now is get these holes made for the fitment of the tail panel to the sides, and then I'll punch holes in the bottom so I can get those ready. and then I'll do a final kind of mock-up and test, and I may run a screw in here or there just so I can see the deck lid come down and interact with the tail panel, because the clamps are in my way right now. Now I know I repeat myself all the time about fitting these pieces together, and I'll do it multiple times, and I've said it before, you can have a variation seemingly every time you put something together. So I'm happy with how this is all fitting. I took some marks and marked where I did not want to put holes in the tail panel because of the overlap of the quarter, and also where I wanted to put that centerpiece in. I'm using this punch tool. There will be a link for that down below. They're available on Amazon. But it's a fantastic tool. It makes an 8mm hole, or basically 5/16. So I go around the perimeter on the driver's side quarter panel, make sure I have all the holes in place that I want, and then here on the passenger side I repeat that same process. And where the flange is at the bottom right there is where I did not put any holes in the tail panel, because that piece will weld to the tail panel. So I verify the tail panel fit, and then I get the corner piece out and I punch some holes in it as well, trying to prep it for the weld process. I know I can't punch a hole in that rain gutter though, so I move on to use a drill later. So here's what I've decided to do. After test fitting and trying to get all of the pieces in at the same time, I realize I'm kind of defeating myself. What I mean by that is, as I'm trying to push the quarter panel out to make it line up with the deck lid on this side, and as I try to push it out on that side, make adjustments, it's not helping me. So what I want to do is secure the tail panel to the car at the bottom. So I'm going to weld this in, and then I don't have to fight with everything. Like, I have clamps holding this right now, and I've adjusted everything so that this aligns correctly with the deck lid. So when I close this down and I align it with the quarter panels, I've got a really nice clean reveal all the way across. So I know that that part is good. I've done drop measurements. As you know, I've got my trailer jig that I use. I have a piece of 1-inch square tubing down there that I'll use as a reference to give me a cross extension, so it'll stick out past the end of the boat trailer, or I might reposition it in different ways. So once I know everything is zeroed out and level, I feel really confident about where this is at as far as up and down, right, and the side to side, because also we have the notches that I've talked about. Now I know a lot of people get caught up in the holes that hold the rear valance on, and I don't put a lot of faith in those, because even if they're already in the tailpiece here, or in this lower panel, that doesn't mean they're going to fit right. So you might put your rear valance up and it might not even be in the same spot. So don't worry about those too much. Worry about the end result, how it's going to look afterwards. So I'm just going to weld that across the bottom, and don't forget, don't weld this section, because that's where that support goes inside here. So you don't want to weld that shut and then go, oh no, I got to start over. And I'm not going to put that in just yet. I want to make sure everything else is nice and snug, and then I'll put that in later. And so you know, I'm using this YesWelder DP200, and I have 30 thousandths wire in there. I've already preset this to the thickness that I want, so it shouldn't be a big deal to weld this back together, or I should say weld it together. So what I want to do now is push the quarter out and clamp it to the tail panel. Then I can weld it, but I want to make sure I have that gap nice the way I want it. So I'm going to use my broom handle or whatever it is, and this block, and rotate that out, clamp it, and then I'll double check my gap, make sure it's consistent and nice, which it is, and then I can weld that. Now, I'm not going to weld this upper portion because I need that to have space for the corner piece to go in. So I want to make sure I have all of this secured down here. And I'll weld this side in, and that way it can't move. So right now, I can still fit this piece in, and I will comment that I played around with it earlier. I was able to get it to fit really nice here and up here in the corner. And this part of this extension, I took a hammer and just kind of tapped it down while I was clamping everything in place, right? And it did move. It got a lot tighter on this piece down here, so I'm liking it more, but there may be some more fine tuning that I do in the end. So I'm going to get the other side on, and then we'll come back and work on this stuff. So I have the perimeter welded, and I have mocked up both of the corner pieces. Now there's still some things I need to do, like I need to punch some holes where I've marked these, right? I've also realized that in getting this in place and clamping it up good and solid, I was able to tap this down with a hammer. Basically, that gap is now gone. And on this side, I have a clamp holding it, so it fits really nice. So I'm going to put 2 holes up here up on top so that this can weld to this. I'm also going to punch a couple holes here so that I can weld through to catch the backside piece of the corner piece. And I need to drill a hole through here so I can weld straight through. And also, this, as it turns out, is a little wide, so I may dolly that in just to tighten it up, because right now there's a gap overlapping the tail panel piece. This side, you can see there's some inconsistency, like this gap is a little bit wider here than it is on this side, but everything else is where it's supposed to be. So it's just maybe the stamping, maybe this piece is a little short, I didn't measure them, but there's some sort of variation. Not that it really matters, I'm just pointing that out. Sometimes you get carried away with a pattern or a shape, and you realize, hey, something's not right, and it ends up being just a misstamping or something like that. So anyway, don't get too concerned with that. Same thing up here, got to make some extra holes. And I did a little research. I was talking about a measurement from here to here, and I was speculating that it was 15 inches. After further review, I feel like, and after looking at the deck lid, when I push it down, I can compare. At the minimum, I'm saying at the minimum, you need about 15 3/8 of an inch on the inside, or maybe 16 1/4 on the back side. And I say that because whenever the deck lid comes down, I can't fully close it, it ends up, the seal is, in this case, it'll be on the back edge of the tail panel. So anything you do to help this come back is going to help. Also, I'll show you later, I've been making sure the extensions fit nice and the gap is really consistent on the interaction with the tail panel. So I need to trim this a little bit. I don't like the way this angle, when you look across, it's kind of wide here and it gets narrow here. So I'm going to fix that, make it look better. This one looks pretty good. And again, that'll get seam sealer on it anyway, but little details that'll help clean it up. So pay attention to everything. Test fit, test fit, test fit. Now what I've done before I do this welding is I had sanded off the EDP coating on that surface where the tail panel meets that corner, and I put some weld through primer. I've been using a zinc weld through primer, and I've talked about it before. I don't always use weld through, but I felt like I would just use it here, knowing that the EDP coating needs to come off, at least on the the outside part of this panel. Typically I leave it on the inside, and it's not as big a concern with the inside because the outside is exposed to the weather more, and you want to make sure that's all cleaned up and primed properly. So I go around and I weld all these areas, and you can see like there's 5 or 6 welds on top of the tail panel, and then the couple that I do where it overlaps at the seam location where the deck lid will meet with the seal. And then on the side here, I had drilled some small holes, maybe 1/4 inch, because there wasn't a lot of edge distance on the corner piece as it went up behind the quarter panel. So I couldn't make big holes there. It didn't make any sense. So I drilled 2 small holes in the rain gutter and 3 holes on the side where it met the quarter panel with the corner piece. Now this section here, I tapped it down and I work it in with the the clamps and the vice grips, and it worked out really well. I was concerned with that at the beginning, but it went down fine. And then on that back edge where I'm tapping here and making it fit, I'm just plugging in these holes and finishing off the rest of this. Now I took a hammer and dolly and I reshaped the piece that overlapped the tail panel, rolled that back in, and I may trim some of that off later. I didn't show it in the video, but it made it a little bit long. And then of course this block that I've had for decades is so handy to use in these situations. So I was able to turn that around and use it inside the rain gutter to reshape that, and then I just kind of rolled that flange back a little more to make it look nicer. So here's a look with the deck lid and the quarter extensions in place. And I'll point out this gap going forward gets a little wider up here at the front, but it's pretty nice back here. And also this gap where the extension meets the deck lid, that's going to end up changing. And the reason for that is this needs to rotate out just a little, okay? And that's going to I'll have to do something up here. I may have to cut it, push that flange back to make this come out. It needs to do that because I can't really go any much further forward with the deck lid. I mean, the gap is good here, and right now this is sticking out a little. So if I rotate the extension, it's going to be fine. Same thing on the other side. Gap gets a little bit tighter up there. Not a big concern. Back here it's pretty good. Get the deck lid up a little. Same situation. This needs to rotate. So when I do this, it's going to correct this overall. You can see like the decklid, that's the shape. You can manipulate that some, but if this was bolted tight to this, now you've got a transition that's not going to work. But if you rotate this back, rotate it back slightly, it cleans all that up. So at the top here, like I said before, I may cut a line, push that flange back, and just weld a filler in. Not a big deal. That'll work out just fine. On the inside, of course, I welded all of these pieces, and I got that there is no gap now. I will grind down this little bit of flange sticking out here, clean that up. That'll get seam seal. This is all connected. Everything's welded in. Same thing on this side. I have managed to get that to roll down the way I wanted it. It's all welded solid. Now, the deck lid, as I was talking about it previously, I don't know how well I can show this. I may have to take the extension off. Yeah, let me take an extension off and show you where the seal is going to go. So there, the extension's off. And if you look down that line, I don't know how well it'll show up in the camera, but now that seal, which will be on this flat surface here, is going to mate much closer to that upper part of the tail panel. Also, when this is down, the gap here is about a finger's width, and it's consistent all the way across. And that is why when I talk about things like these extensions, if you try to work to them, then you change variables here. Like this may be able to go forward a 1/16 of an inch. I mean, honestly, whenever you bring it up, you have to be careful with how it interacts. You can see it gets really close to the deck filler, but I may be able to bring it forward just a hair, and that'll help compensate for that. Just like I could adjust this, the hinge down just a hair to try to take away a little more of that transition. But overall, I have no complaints. This looks really good, and everything is fitting correctly the way it should. I did not put the bracket here yet. This is not welded in, as I showed earlier. I did not weld these series of plug welds there, so I could get that in there, but I want to do some more measurements and test fitting with that before I fully weld that in. And I still have to weld up here at these corners, rotate that, and haven't decided yet. I talked about it I think in the other video. I considered cutting a line here on in this corner so that this could bend that way easier and down a little more to tighten this up, because you can see it sticks up pretty good there. But if I cut and help massage it down, give it somewhere to go, that may alleviate most of that. This side is pretty good. It fits really nice. So anyway, that's where we're at, and I am pretty happy with the results on this right now. So that will be the end of this video. I try to give you as much information as I can in case you're trying to do something similar to what I'm doing here. And I also try to show you that with pretty much basic hand tools. I know it's easy to get caught up in buying expensive tools and parts and whatever, but I'm just showing you can do it with simple stuff like using blocks of wood to move those quarter panels. That's all it took. You don't need some high-powered hydraulic system to make that work. So just think a little bit of different ways you can approach this. Right now, I'm going to probably move on. I think probably time to move on to the front suspension on the car and get the cross member in, all that sort of thing. But I have a few other things I need to take care of this coming week. So one of those is I plan to take the Cobra Jet back to its owner next week. So I have to get all that stuff taken care of, get all the pieces and parts gathered up, get it in a trailer, and prepare to make that drive down to Florida, and then of course make the trip back. Got to return. And there's another thing that I'm going to discuss briefly. If you look up here, right there is a box. That box is a laser welder. I had a company contact me they asked me if I would kind of do a review on the laser welder. Now you've probably seen those, and you know that you see the videos where somebody's got two pieces of steel at a 90-degree angle and they're buzzing that thing together and it looks beautiful. And I'm going to try it and see if I can use it. I don't know how well it would work for doing sheet metal work, but we'll see. We'll see. It may be if I can get it figured out in time, I may use it as part of the assembly on putting the front section of the car together, because there's a lot of heavy steel up there, and that might look pretty cool, assuming that it works the way it's supposed to. But I'm going to find out. Otherwise, as always, I want to thank my patrons. They support me in making these videos, and I thank them so much. I do actually have another video that I want to make for SEMA, where I have some interviews and I have some products in there that I've looked at, and of course the whole experience from SEMA. So I got to work on that video as well. We'll see how that comes. You know, it's tough to get everything done when you're a one-man show. But that's it for this video. So thanks for watching, and until next time, take care of yourselves. See ya. The car is known as Fangled. Now I will say I went to, hold on. So that I can weld into, through the quarter panel and get to the inside. I'm also going to drill, or